Welcome to the Black Girls Heal podcast, where we talk about changing unavailable relationship patterns, healing unresolved trauma, and building a healthy relationship with first you and then others. Every episode, we will talk about actionable advice that you can apply today to break unhealthy patterns and grow your self-worth. I'm Sheena Tubbs. Let's begin. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Black Girls Heal. I hope that this finds you well. I'm sending you so much positivity and love to whatever corner of the world that you are listening to this. I'm so grateful that you are here, and I hope that this episode brings you healing and brings you clarity. Before we get into today, I just wanted to thank all of the women who applied to join us over the last week and a half in our coaching program. It has been so incredible. A little bit over 200 women applied to join us. And then everyone who applied was invited to join us for a private training where I talked about how to let your walls down and then talked about our program in detail. And when I tell you that workshop was so great, I taught for 2 hours. There were tears. There was light dragging, according to y'all. There were breakthroughs. The chat was on fire. Just the community and love that y'all were giving to each other. You know, me and Team Black Girls Heal, we were talking about it afterwards and just how powerful it was and just how much you could feel people shifting in that room was just so incredible. And I'm so grateful that we got to do that. And so thank you to all of you ladies who joined us. And if you have been thinking about applying, you have not missed your chance. You can still apply to join us. You can just go to blackgirlsheal.org/apply. So that's that. Let's get into today's episode. So I've actually recorded this intro maybe 6 times. And then I sent what I thought was going to be the final intro to the podcast people, to my podcast team. When I say podcast people, to my podcast editing team folks, to reinsert the new intro. And then over this weekend, I was like, nah, that still ain't it. And I'm like, let me just say what I want to say before we get into the teaching. So today's topic is about seeing financial complacency and financial abandonment as a red flag in relationships. Because what I've found is that many women will get into partnerships where they are left to carry the emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, financial load of the partnership and not see this coming from the beginning, who are feeling really undervalued and underappreciated, and they're wondering, is it them? Is the relationship salvageable? Is it their partner? Is there a way to bring it back to how it was before? Was how it was before ever really good in the first place? And just a lot of these questions. And a lot of times a missing red flag that goes under the radar, which I'm going to talk about more why that happens in the teaching today. But a big red flag is when a partner, especially a male partner, is financially, I don't want to say irresponsible, but underachieving or financially complacent was the best way that I knew how to talk about it without using a lot of words that other people use, which I try to be as strengths focused as I can. You know, I do shoot it straight, but I also don't want to disparage and just talk about people who are probably trying their best in as many ways as they can. So, but other language that other people, teachers, platforms will use when they're talking about what I'm going to talk about today is watching out about dating a man who's broke or dating a man that's stingy or dusty. There's a lot of, videos, lessons, talks around the problems with 50-50 relationships and getting into a partnership with someone who expects you to do things 50-50 and how that can be a big red glaring warning sign and stuff like that. And so even as I just said that part right now, this is why I wanted to introduce this episode, because I wanted to make a couple of things clear. First of all, there are a lot of people who are in partnerships, and this could be several of y'all. I'm probably going to list some things that that relate to y'all. People who are in partnerships with men where you are the breadwinner and y'all are perfectly fine with that. And your partner is showing up for you in a way that feels safe and seen and honored and loved and protected and respected and loved and cherished, right? And there are some people who have a partnership where they have both chosen that they want to, because of financial goals, because of, maybe wanting to retire early, maybe wanting to put their kids through school, break generational curses, that both people are going to work. And so it's intentionally 50-50. And then there's lots of people who it's not even that both people are working and you're the breadwinner, but that your partner has stayed home. Again, I'm still talking about heterosexual relationships, even though this episode that I'm talking about, absolutely, my lesbian and queer clients have been able to relate what I'm going to talk about this being a red flag for them. But anyways, like they are house dads or house husbands and your relationship is working, right? If that any of those cases are you, this episode is not for you. However, if it is you in that you are the breadwinner in a relationship and your partner, you feel maybe resents you or feels entitled to you taking care of them and maybe has had extramarital affairs, you feel like they don't really like you and that you just watched this slow decline over time and they just don't really have as much empathy as you would want them to have for everything that you're carrying on your back, in spite of conversations, in spite of all the things that you've done, all the therapy you may have done, then maybe this episode is for you. As much as possible, I just want to make sure that I am acknowledging and respecting the incredible diversity and spectrum of people and the relationships that we have, so that no one feels targeted or slighted or as if I'm making a blanket statement. But there are so many women that I've talked to, that have been in my DMs in the past, who have been my students, that I've seen in my family, who have missed this red flag of partnering with someone who will literally let them take on the world and not step in to support or protect them. And because of the woman's own traumatic past and history, she will miss it. And so I wanted to do an episode that would help you see that if this has been part of your pattern, if this is a relationship that you are currently in. I also wanted to share this to maybe put words to what's going on for you and to validate maybe what is happening for you so that you can decide your next steps, knowing that you're not making this up in your head and knowing that you always have a choice. And so that's all I'll say for now. Whew. Let's get into it, y'all. Financial complacency as a red flag. Today I'm going to talk about a lot of different components about this. I have a couple pages worth of notes. So who knows how long this episode is going to be, but I'm going to do my best to not make it super long. But I'm going to talk about why it is that we connect with people who are financially complacent or may financially abandon us in relationships. I'm going to talk about what it looks like when we're in relationships with them and how they present and how we end up missing this as a red flag. I'm going to talk about how the relationship changes once we're with them, because usually once you start off in relationships, at least the type of partners, I'm going to talk about people who are financially complacent, who are nice guys. And I'm specifically talking about men in this episode instead of partners in general, even though I've definitely supported some lesbian and queer clients who have been in relationships with other women, and they can definitely relate to what I'm about to talk about today. But for the most part, the majority of times that I've helped women with this, it has been in heterosexual cisgender heterosexual relationships. So that's the lens I'm going to come from today. But with that said, I'm going to talk about how we miss this with nice guys and then end up getting got. I'm going to talk about how the trajectory of the relationship changes throughout the relationship and why we end up staying with them. And I'm going to talk about why this is a red flag and not just like a temporary life stage, which I think is why many of us will overlook when someone shows up with not being financially responsible or not being financially a provider, because it seems like this is something that's fixable, especially if we happen to be successful and we know how to overcome whatever they're going through. We are more willing to kind of roll with it. And finally, I'm going to talk about things for you to keep in mind, what to look out for if you stay, and what you need to be prepared for in case you leave. So y'all, like I said, this is actually 5 pages worth of notes, but I'm challenging myself to get through this in a 45-minute to 50-minute episode. So let's talk about it. So again, the type of man I am talking about today, I'm not talking about men who are typically very overt in how they show up as far as being financially negligent. So these are men who are like scammers and will intentionally ask you for money to pay for their rent and all this stuff from the onset. I'm not talking about fuckboys. I'm talking about nice guys with good hearts who are very tender and loving and kind-hearted and seem like they want the best for you, but it just appears as if financially they have not been able to break through to the level that they want to break through or that they tell you that they want to break through. Usually these men are men who talk about having aspirations, but somewhere along the way, there's something always happens that stops them. And as you listen to their story and as you listen to what they've gone through, it makes a lot of sense for you. It explains what has gone wrong, and because it sounds logical, it's like, well, this isn't their fault, and I'm gonna stick beside them. Like all of that stuff is what it can trigger for you. This happens for women across the board, no matter your socioeconomic background, no matter whether or not you identify as love addict or love avoidant, because what this triggers in you, or what this provokes out of you, is, for some women, if your story is related to caretaking, if your story is related to being codependent, especially if you relate to being parentified, if you have grown up with models with women who have taken care of the household and kind of struggled and worked multiple jobs or made a little bit work, whether or not it's poverty trauma or just the way that it's worked, that the women in your family were the heads and the providers. So when you meet a man who presents as more passive or more laid back or docile, it doesn't really stand out to you as a red flag, because it's what you've always seen. It's what you've always experienced, especially if they're showing up and being emotionally available for you and kind and loving and the other ways that you may need. You will really not really have it on your radar. Also, it happens if you are someone who's like super compassionate and caring and understanding, which is many of us. And so when they talk about their background and why they've been kind of stunted or why they are the way they are, and talk about the dreams and the plans that they are in process of making, like maybe they're saying right now, I'm going to school, or right now I'm going for a promotion, or right now I am making X plan to get out of this. We will hold space for that, because we want to make sure that we are not being judgmental of someone who's trying their best. So here's how this will set you up, though, because the punchline of what happens when you're in relationship with someone who is financially complacent and someone who is a financial abandoner is you will end up holding the heavy load in the relationship, not only financially, but usually emotionally and mentally and spiritually, because their lack of responsibility or lack of ownership, like self ownership when it comes to finances and actually pushing themselves and making changes, shows up in other domains of the relationship as well. So this is where we'll get stories of women who are with men who end up resenting them, who end up being jealous of them, competing with them, men who do the 50-50 thing, but really ends up being like 60-40, 80-20, 100-0 over time, even if it might not have started like that explicitly at the beginning. So we get set up to get into that place where we're not looking at how someone is, how a man is with his finances from the beginning as an indicator of kind of their emotional strength. And to be clear, before I go any further, I'm not talking about whether or not someone makes a certain amount of money, because someone can make $40K a year and budget it enough to where his wife or his woman stays at home and he's investing and doing what he needs to do, right? Like, this isn't about a dollar amount. It's about a mentality. It's about whether or not your partner is going to step up and make sure that you're provided for. You know, I have a family member who her partner does not make something that is super competitive, but he has told her over and over that if or when she feels like she needs to leave her job, that he's got it. And he will make sure that she is mentally, emotionally supported and cared for while he's giving her gifts, while he is supporting her emotionally. This is a healthy relationship. This is not a DV relationship where it's like, this is a possessive, stay home and I'll have control over you. But it's a truly, purely, you're my woman, you're my queen, I got you. And that energy is what you're looking for in a partner. You're looking for that safety and protection, and that can happen at any income range. So what I'm talking about is those of us who get in partnerships with someone who is willing to let us carry that load. That for them, it's almost like they feel entitled, that's okay. Like they're entitled to, or they feel like that's okay, or that's normal. And so that's the premise of this. With all that said, when we listen to someone's like backstory, and this is why they are the way that they are, and we're acting in our compassion and care and not really filtering it through, okay, this is their story, but does this work for me long term? Like, if this never changed, would I be okay with this? And I actually being honest with yourself about would that actually be okay with you? Because sometimes we can say, yeah, I could totally live with this. And then you get into it and it's like, wow, like this sucks. This is not what I expected. We listen compassionately, and now we want to help protect them from the disappointment that they've experienced from other people. Because typically these stories come with examples of, former partners, former baby mamas, parents, employers that didn't believe in them, teachers that didn't believe in them, and people who sabotage them from moving forward. And that's the reason why they can't catch a break. So now you listen to that and you're like, you know what? I am not going to be that person for you. And I'm going to prove you wrong. And I'm going to prove that part of you wrong that believes that, the world is unfair. And I'm going to be that ride or die for you. And I'm going to be in your corner and all that stuff. And what that does is when things start to hit the fan, you don't really see it or acknowledge it or think of it as being a problem, because you've already gone into the relationship expecting to receive less and be okay with that, because that's what's needed to support him and support the relationship, right? Don't want to add yourself to the name and to the list of people who have harmed him and hurt him before, because you see the potential. You see like this perfect person in front of you, except for just this one thing, and it's one thing that they want to work on. And so you're like, I got it. I can definitely help you with this. What also happens here is, because you are supporting them, and also because there's a part of emotionally supporting them, and because there's a part of you that also like, man, if I told my girlfriend what's actually going on with him, she would have something to say. You end up not telling your support system. You end up not telling them exactly what's going on behind the scenes and exactly what the deficits are because you're embarrassed. You're embarrassed because they may judge you for it, or you may have fully aligned with him and be like, they're not going to understand the situation. Like, they're going to just judge it from face forward, and they're not going to get their true story. They're not going to get the trauma they went through. And so I'm just not going to tell them because I don't need to have anyone be negative in my ear. And so that leaves you exposed and vulnerable to stay in this situation when there are multiple red flags that may be firing at the same time. Okay. And also, finally, this can happen and kind of slip through the crack is, in this world, in this modern world, many of us, we get a lot of self-validation and validation from just society and the public when we are our independent selves, when we can really stand by the statement, I got my own and I don't need anybody to give me anything else. And so if you get partnered with someone who cannot give you that much, you're like, well, I'm fine as is. And the only thing that's missing is this emotional care and nourishment or nurturance. So for me, I'm fine. And also he has a plan. He has all these dreams. He has all these aspirations to move forward. So we're going to end up being okay anyways, right? Let me say here that, for women who have been provided for and taken care of, hearing what I'm saying so far can be so wild and be so surprising and alarming. And this can be also why, going back to like living in secret, a lot of women don't share, because usually it's like either or. Either someone is fully in one camp where they just don't even see this as a problem. And there are some women who are like, if he can't pay for this, this, and this, and if he's not offering it, then I'm out from the jump. Like, it's a very clear indicator that something is amiss. And I just want to say here that this is where sensitivity for all people's stories is really important, because what's really easy for someone and what's very clear for someone is not for the other. And that's why living in community is so important. That's why living in honesty and vulnerability and talking with your healing circle, talking with your friend group, telling them what's actually going on, being open for advice, you communicating your advice in a loving, supportive way is so important, so that we can all be protective of each other, so that we can all see what's up from the beginning. So that's what's going on with you. Let's talk about what's going on with them. So like I said, these are typically the type of financially complacent men that I'm talking about right now are they're good guys. So they usually have really great hearts. They tend to be very kind. They might be the men that make you laugh and just seem like really great friends. And typically, they may also try to compensate for their lack of financial success by supporting you in other ways. So maybe cleaning or taking out trash or laundry or cooking or anything like that. When you are in relationships with these partners, they, like I said a few times already, they typically have lots of dreams and ambitions. So they will promise you the world. Like, they will tell you, when I get straight, this is what's going to happen. This is how I'm going to make sure I get straight. This is my next endeavor. And this is step 2 and step 5 and all that other stuff. And what you will find if you're listening to the story is, no matter how old they are or what age there's always something that gets in the way of them making plans, or their plans actually coming to pass, or something that blocks them. And if you're with this type of partner for a long period of time, if you're listening to this and you're still with this person, or you've been with this person in the past, this type of person in the past, you find over time that their plans don't come to fruition because there's always something that happens, or they drop out, or they lose interest, or there's always an excuse. And at first, if you may want to be supportive and you might even provide solutions, and they may have lots of reasons why the solutions won't work out or won't apply or it won't fit. And if you're already committed to this person, you may try to write it out, but soon over time, you will find that this is just their type of self-sabotage. That has nothing to do with you, that has nothing to do with them not having access to solutions. It has everything to do with just their own limiting beliefs. Yes, also the trauma they've gone through and their own self-work that they have to work through to self-actualize and step into their full identity. As I was talking about that, I wanted to share, if you're someone who's listening to someone else talk about their dreams and their plan, and they're telling you their stories about how things have never worked out, and you start to think about, oh, well, if that would have happened to me, if I would have had that roadblock, I would have done this, or there's a solution to that, but what about this? And you're starting to kind of like tap into, these are all things that are solvable. I want your next step to not be the codependent thought of like, let me help you fix this. Like, this is easy. Because just like you have probably been very resilient and have very, very real limitations in your life, that because you were so dedicated and because you were motivated and because you actually wanted the change, you figured it out and you did it, that person needs that same energy as well. So I want you to more so, I'm not saying not to help, I want you to more listen before you offer in support, and be very deliberate in the amount and type of support that you offer. And don't make yourself so committed to making this thing happen for this person, because it is their life that they have to have more passion and more energy and more dedication to the outcome than you. If you are in relationship, and I had a whole episode about being codependent as a healer, if you have more emotional charge over what happens to somebody than they do, and also finding a solution to the problem than they do, like maybe they're really good about complaining about something and they're really good about sitting in the problem and talking about how it's not fair, and they have a whole lot of emotion about that, but when it comes to actually walking in a solution, not so much. Pay attention to that, because that's showing you where they are. And that's why when it comes to being a healer and a giver and a compassionate heart, you have to be very clear on your boundaries. It's not about walking through life being stone cold and saying, well, if you're struggling, it's because you decided to be there. That's not what this is. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a reason of how they've gotten where they are. I want you to not self-abandon and risk your own sense of stability and peace mentally, spiritually, physically, sexually, financially, to take care of somebody else, which happens in this type of partnership when you miss these red flags. So that's how they are as a person. But as far as what's happening underneath, usually this person does have a lot of trauma, like I've already mentioned. They have real things that have happened to them that has made it hard for them to feel confident in themselves and to feel strong. A lot of times abuse is really a part of this, especially emotional abuse or maybe even physical abuse, that really makes them doubt their strength and, their masculinity, and it makes it hard for them to stand in it. And all these things are very real. And it's also very real that this is something that they have to do the work to work through. And I think this gets missed as a red flag by women who are very compassionate and loving and giving, because we incorrectly believe that we can love somebody out of their trauma. We incorrectly believe that by me sticking beside him and me nurturing this man is going to erase all of the memories that they have before. What that will do is absolutely add you to a support system. It may even add you to the inner circle. But he's going to have to do that shadow work. He's going to have to go through those inner demons. He's going to have to release and forgive and unlearn all of the messages that he has learned his whole life. That is not something that you can do for him. And we really want to do that. And we really try to do that, but it doesn't make it successful, which is why, once I get to what happens in the relationship, happens. Related to their trauma and the things that they saw and the reason why, someone who starts off really kind and loving in this relationship will end up kind of turning on you in a way, happens is usually one of the types of trauma that happen is around women and their families specifically, or especially like mother wound and mother trauma. Very similar to you, like attracts like, they may have witnessed the women in their family or the mothers in their family do everything. Be the provider, be the protector, hold all the roles, be the financial provision, and they may not have had any or very few healthy masculine role models for them. So what they have seen is that, of course, women are supposed to do everything because that's what I saw my mama do. So you can do it too. They are not really as moved by, once you get into a long-term partnership with them, they are not really moved by the impact of the heavy stress and the heavy burden that being the provider of the home or the relationship or the family looks like for you, because they don't really have any models otherwise, and they did not have any masculine roles say, this is what a leader and a protector looks like. Okay? Once again, I feel like this is a good place for me to say that I am talking about cisgender heterosexual relationships and their norms in this episode. I completely know that there is a full range of experiences. What I am talking to is the experience of the cisgender heterosexual women who I've coached and who have been in my inboxes and who have cried on my shoulders and who have suffered at the hands of physical, mental, and emotional trauma and financial trauma, being in partnerships with men who did not care to protect them or love them. And my desire in this episode is to add another way for you to see a red flag that usually slips through that we may not see because of our own experiences, and because we're also told as Black women that we should be strong enough and resilient enough to not expect things from anybody, and we should be grateful for the little bit that we get. I'm very intentionally trying to dismantle that right now. And so that stops me from being as expansive in my delivery that I can be. Sorry, not sorry. So I just want that to be very clear. So let's talk about how, y'all are connected. All you see right now is the good heart, the things that they do for you. You're totally fine with like where they are. So some things that can happen is you splitting bills, you trying to help buy them stuff, you helping them enroll in school, you doing all kinds of things that may look like favors. Again, it does not have to be as overt as you paying somebody's rent or all that stuff, which though it absolutely can be, you buying them shoes from Foot Locker, but it looks like small favors that you're trying to do to help lighten the load or be of support or show that you're in this with them or try to be fair and pull your weight. I hear that a lot from women who feel like they need to not expect everything from their partners and they feel guilt about it. It's not coming from a place of wholeness or empowerment that they feel empowered to help, but it's more they don't want to be a burden to someone, and which is carried on trauma. And so that may happen in the relationship as well. And those small favors you find start to happen more frequently, become expected, and become the norm because your need to help upkeep the relationship is what's keeping the relationship afloat at the same time. Let's talk more about why this is needed to keep the relationship afloat. So I don't know about you and the journey that you've had to build consistency in your relationships, but the roller coaster of over-attaching to people And then hiding from relationships after disappointment and heartbreak is exhausting. And sometimes you can feel as if you're trying your best, doing all the things, only to end up in a dead-end relationship or confused if there's something you're missing about what you're doing wrong or what you're bringing to the table. And so because of that, in our 6-month coaching program, From Avoidant to Available, we help single women clear the path to develop and nurture healthy relationships with available partnerships, with available friendships, with our special high-touch hybrid approach combining group coaching, community support, and private coaching check-ins. If you'd like to get off the roller coaster of being either addicted or avoidant in relationships to become balanced and available, feel free to learn more at our website by going to fromavoidanttoavailable.com and apply to join us in the next cohort. So like I already said, typically part of the trauma that happens with these type of men as partners is the mother wound trauma. And we had a whole episode on mother wounds, and men are just as affected because we're all human beings. We're all human beings with feelings, and the human need to be comforted, loved, cherished, and esteemed as babies. Men, women, non-binary persons, we all have that human need. And when that is not there, it creates wounding and negative core beliefs and unhealthy coping mechanisms to go forward. So what typically happens is if a man is pretty passive in his ability to parent himself and lead himself, which looks like a lot of plans that don't come through and not really stepping in his full identity and ownership and being very passive, he is enabled by people who help take care of him because he doesn't quite know how to take care of himself. And usually these people are women. So whether the woman is his mother, whether the woman is going from partner to partner, whether or not it is other female friends who see this and because of their own mother wound trauma, they want to come in and help mother as well. But you as a partner, you end up coming in and maintaining a role as mother instead of partner here. So you start helping to take care of them, whether it's emotionally or physically, especially financially. And it feels good, especially if you're someone who ascribes to being codependent in some relationships. You get everything that you ever wanted, right? You get a partnership, you get that access to a masculine form, you get to still kind of be in control and call the shots, because typically this person will defer to you to make the decisions as well. But you get the help that they're giving you in whatever area they're giving you help. And it seems like everything can be copacetic at first, but you're missing the richness that happens when you actually have someone who is looking you eye to eye instead of looking up to you, or actually stepping into the relationship as your equal. What starts off as this mother-son relationship kind of like being a good thing that's kind of like blurry and like it feels still romantic, it starts to go left because it is connected to mother trauma. So that unresolved pain, resentment, bitter feelings, feeling misunderstood, feeling controlled, feeling judged, feeling all of that stuff, all the stuff that person has most likely said about the other people in his life, especially most likely women. I missed that part. Typically this person, when you're first meeting them and hearing their story, when they're talking about all the people who've done them wrong, usually it's a long list of women as well, from a variety of relationships, from partners to family. Over time, you end up stepping into that role, not because you are looking for it, but that projection of their own trauma, because it was never about you. It's never about whether or not they have had access to healthy, available people in their life. It's more about how they feel about themselves and how they interpret the events that happen around them. And that's what builds their reality, right? So same thing I've always said about us as listeners of this podcast, that our relationships are actually a reflection of who we are and how we feel about ourselves. Their stories and their story that they're telling you is a very accurate reflection of whether or not they feel victimized by the world, whether or not they feel out of control, and whether or not they feel like they can actually step up and step into themselves. That has nothing to do with you. So over time, that honeymoon leaves, and now you are the enemy. You are the person who is now victimizing them. No matter how much help or care or love you've started to give this person, it ends up becoming resentment. Sometimes the resentment is overt, with them verbally saying it to you and verbally telling you how you're holding them back, or you never helped them, or you never believed in them. Sometimes they go into their own passivity, which can look like infidelity and them cheating on you and looking for ways outside of the relationship that they feel like a man and feel more connected to their strength if you have been leading the charge in the relationship. A lot of times, going back to kind of the point of this podcast and talking about the financial impact, when this happens, it can also look like them using your money to go and finance this life outside of the relationship. So with you, they don't have money to wine you, to dine you, to take care of you. There could be a lot of conflicts when meanwhile they have access to your funds and they're using your funds to buy purses, buy dinners, buy shoes for whoever their girlfriend is, pay their girlfriend's rent, and you're over there suffering, but they feel entitled to do that because, again, you've been painted as the enemy. This can cause so much pain for you as the woman in this relationship, and a whole lot of sense of helplessness, where you may have entered in as feeling very in control because this is a slow burn, depending on how long you've been with the person. This usually presents as a slow burn because it's a nice person. You can kind of look up at where you are and be like, oh my God, how did this happen? And how did I get here? And can I even get out? You know, I've said in other podcast episodes that sometimes people stay in relationships because they feel like they've been there for too long. And especially when it's centered around potential, we can see what's going on and be like, man, I've invested too much time, energy, money, sex into this person. I feel like I've communicated so much. I'd be damned if I leave and somebody else gets the benefit of my work. And to that, I would say I totally hear that and I get it. And also you got to look at, are you living in a fantasy that this person is magically going to fix how they show up in the world in the next, in 2 months' time? Let's say you left and they met somebody 2 months later. I would more think that maybe the cycle is probably most likely going to repeat. But let's say your story, let's say you ended up leaving this person and they do turn it around. They do get better. I just believe that if you've spent a long time of your life waiting for someone to change and not living in what you actually need and want, I think it's actually more worth the risk for you to make a change and be with people who actually can provide for you, and that you don't have to raise, and you don't have to train, and you don't have to coddle, and you don't have to build, but that you can actually show up as your full self and your full womanhood and not have to do anything, to stop working so hard. We work so hard in so many areas of our life and we feel like that's normal. And I know that relationships are work, but this type of work where you feel like you have to mother and build a bear in a partner, that I don't think that is the best path for us. And so it's totally up to you listening to that to figure out what does work for you and what doesn't work for you. But just wanted to share that. And just to be clear on, the stuff what I mean by mothering is typically because this person can be an underachiever in some areas of their life and like have these time gaps or skill gaps or trauma gaps that you coming into the partnership, you decided to do so, and they fully welcomed you in because you were like the missing piece for them and really great at helping them. That support now looks like being told what to do and being nagged at, when before it could have been more like, I can't do this without you, and I, love this about you, and you make me want to be better, and now it's like you never believed in me, is what it escalates to. So I think I already talked about the next thing. For me to talk about the next section is what makes this a red flag and not a temporary life stage. And I think I've already gone through it, but I'm going to just say this portion just to make sure that this is clear, because again, my hesitance in having this episode for so long is I know that when it comes to money and when it comes to men and masculinity, and even us as women, the way that some of us are very protective over our men and feeling as if we say any kind of criticism that is equal with us saying that men are not worth anything, and it can like spark this desire to overprotect. I want it to be very clear that that's not the intention of this, that I'm talking about a very specific personality type or presentation type of a red flag for some people. And it's not that people can never come out of it. What I'm saying is that they are the ones who are in charge of doing the work, not us. So what makes it a red flag and not a temporary life stage? Because sometimes we meet people who are at their lowest. Sometimes we meet people who are struggling because they just got cancer, or someone in their life just got cancer or passed away, or there was a big tragedy that happened, or they've been depressed, and it truly is abnormal from how they live their life. And to that, I would say for you to know if that's the case, you would need to listen to their full story to see, is this really a season and a chapter in their life where they've kind of lost their way and they need to rebuild and heal and figure out their next step? Or is this just one part of their story? Is this a season, a chapter where this is the theme of the reason why they will not and choose not to execute on their goals, why they choose not to show up as their best self? And 5 years before, it was another excuse. And 5 years before that, it was something else, right? While life just won't ever give them a break. Because what happens in relationships when you're with these type of people is you end up being drained by their heaviness. You end up not being able to soar like they may have originally presented to you or said that they aspire to, but they end up dragging you down to their level, and they end up dragging you down to what they think is possible and what they think is comfortable. And you stay there because you're now trying to pull them up as you're soaring as well, right? And especially if you're someone who ends up marrying them or having children with them, now you have not only their heavy weight, but now you have the weight of providing for a family and supporting a family and worrying about what happens if, dad is not in the house while, you're trying to take care of kids, and how that's going to impact them. So there's a lot of things that happen if you stay in partnerships with them for a long period of time. Another reason for you to know that this is another way for you to make sure that it's not a temporary life stage versus a red flag is to look at their mentality and whether or not they actually intentionally execute on what they want to change, because we know that sometimes it's more comfortable, no matter how much, it might not be desirable, but sometimes it's more comfortable to stay exactly where you are, because there's no risk of rejection or disappointment. And especially if that person has trauma where they've experienced that a lot, it makes sense why they would want to stay there. So it's easier to stay the weight that you are at instead of cutting out sugar or exercising. It's easier to stay in debt instead of you going through the temporary discomfort of saving and practicing discipline. It's easier for you to move from job to job and blame the employer and say it's not your fault, instead of maybe looking at maybe you are not a good employee and maybe there's something that you need to actually work on and improve yourself, right? So these are all things for you to keep in mind. I've also said for you to remember that you cannot fix this person's mother wound, no matter how kind you are, no matter how good you are in bed, no matter, how long you plan to support them. That is their own trauma they have to fix, Relatedly, you can also not be this man's masculine or father figure. And the reason why I wanted to say that and phrase it in that way is, you know, usually when someone is financially complacent or underachiever, what they're lacking is like executive leadership skills. And for many of us, we have that in spades. We know how to navigate the boardroom. We know how to navigate interviewing. We know how to navigate networking and, trying and starting businesses and ending businesses, or, going to the C-suite and beyond. And we may want to impart those skills into this person, but you cannot provide that leadership model for someone that you are trying to partner with, who may not want to even grow in that area, or feels unworthy of operating in that area. Men just as much as us feel unworthy when they have unresolved childhood trauma. It may present differently, but they have the exact same feelings that we do. And so you cannot train someone to be stronger and be more self-assured if that's not something they want for themselves. And if that is something that they want for themselves, honestly, they most likely are not going to go to their woman. They're not going to go to their partner. Like, they may ask you for feedback and advice, but they are most likely, if they're very dedicated to that, they're going to go and find their own resources so that when they can come here and be with you, they can actually be with you, right? And so also that you don't accidentally navigate into that place of like nagging and stuff that can dismantle a relationship when it's not clear, healthy communication between the two of you. So last thing I'll say, because I'm getting to the end of the limit that I set for myself, I want you to hear the things I want you to be aware of if you stay, and then I'm going to share the things for you to be prepared for in case you decide to leave. If you stay, be prepared for feeling emotionally gaslit. So a lot of, that's not really how it happened, or, you're being too sensitive, or I help out all the time. I already talked about being dragged down to their level as far as standard of living and standard of what makes you happy, makes them happy. I also talked about the potential for them to step out of the relationship because they do have a need to feel needed, right? And if they don't feel needed in the relationship, then they're going to find it elsewhere. And that need to be needed can have nothing to do with you and whether or not, like, you could be telling him every day, I need you. But again, it's more about his own sense of trauma and how he feels about himself. You need to be aware that the stress on your body, on your mental health, on your emotions, with having the weight of carrying all this, most likely will not get better if this is not how you want it to be. It's going to continue to be stressful. So please, please, please get with a therapist as soon as you can to process the impact of all this if you're choosing to stay, so that you can hopefully get some type of tools or some kind of resources to help you as you build a different set of boundaries around the situation that you have for you right now. I'm going to share examples that other people have shared with me about what happened in their relationships with their partners where this was the case. There was a lot of direct insults that I've heard about, as far as them not cutting it, attacks on their looks, attacks on how they are not measuring up to what they could be and how the person deserved better or could get better, and just really a lot of completely devaluing that person. That was based on their own resentment and projection of how they felt about themselves, but it was easy to scapegoat and blame their partner for them feeling emasculated, even though that emasculation started before the partnership and they intentionally got in a relationship with someone to take care of them and then resented the person that was taking care of them, right? So there's that. Something else I've heard is, or at least this is an example from how things started. So I had one client who was telling me about how she was going back and forth with someone who was a really good friend. And the only thing that was wrong was what I'm discussing exactly here, the financial underachievement and them not really showing up for themselves. And she said that there have been times where, they would literally get together and she would help him map out a plan, like a 10 or 5 year plan, and, basically be his career coach. And he would get so excited about it, and then nothing would happen. And she would be like, well, in all these other ways, he's fantastic except for this. And I'd be like, no, don't do it, because this is what you have to look forward to. Like, that's not going to get better. That's exactly where he is. And it'd be different if you were telling me you were fine with that. But what you're telling me is that this is a deal breaker for you and you're willing to overlook it. And if it's actually a deal breaker for you, you need to listen to that. So there's that. If you do choose to leave, here are the things for you to be prepared for. I want you to be prepared for feeling some embarrassment. When you're in a relationship, and this is any type of relationship that is time to take a break, once you start to replay what happened, you can start to feel some embarrassment because you're like looking at all the things that you missed or that you're willing to overlook. And now without you being in that partnership and kind of like numbed to like having to feel the impact of it, you can look back and be like, dang, girl, what were you thinking? And I just want you to know that's normal. That's part of the processing. And I would hate for you to stay in a relationship because you're afraid of feeling embarrassed, especially if it's draining you. Even more reason for you to leave so that you can heal from that embarrassment and move forward. So yeah, there's that. And then also there could even be double embarrassment if other people saw it. So whether or not those other people are your children, if there were loved ones, or there were times that in public, they made you feel like you were not enough or you weren't cutting it. If they kind of played the victim and other people ganged up on you while they ridiculed you and didn't support you, that can also feel very embarrassing. So there's that. Related to embarrassment is guilt. So guilt if you have little ones or people who you partnered, that you sired, that you had. Why did I say sired? Girl, let me, that means I'm tired. If you had any babies with this person, if you had any children with this person or with these people, if you've been in multiple relationships of this nature, you can have some guilt for the impact of how this is going to affect them, have some regret. Also guilt in case you didn't have children, but you had, like I said before, with people watching. So maybe you had some nieces or nephews or siblings or other people, younger siblings who watch you go through this. You can feel some embarrassment with kind of feeling exposed and maybe feeling like you were being a bad example. You can feel guilt about feeling like you've lost time. There's that. You also need to be prepared for the person not snapping out of it. So what I mean by that is if you were the enemy by the time you exited the relationship, so y'all moved past the honeymoon to where they actually started to resent your mothering financial impact in their life, that may not go away. Maybe it will, but a lot of times it doesn't. So if you were the enemy at the end of the relationship, you most likely will be added to their roster of people who didn't show up for them and that did them wrong and that never believed in them and victimized them and stole from them or, set them up for failure, right? And you are going to be the Darth Vader from here going forward and the worst and most corrupt person that ever lived. And if you feel as if you really invested a lot and sacrificed a lot and loved this person through and through and gave them a lot of grace, it can be very hurtful for that to be now how you're remembered and discussed with loved ones that maybe y'all share together or just even with strangers that you'll never get to meet. And I just want to validate that and also name that for you so that when that happens, you will expect it. But also because you can expect it, maybe not internalize that as maybe that's true. To understand that this is part of how they have to process what happened for them to feel safe and seen, and it may not be right, but that's what they need to do, and they will move on to their next relationship, and either they will figure it out or the cycle will repeat with the next person. So just be prepared for not really ever getting the thank you or the credit for what you did, unless of course they do their own self-work and do their own self-reflection, then that would be really great closure for you. Another emotion for you to be prepared for is envy of this person. And the reason why you will most likely feel envy is that you will find that this person, because they were on the receiving end and you were the one that was giving and giving and giving and kind of draining yourself in a lot of different ways, that this person was unaffected, that they will leave the relationship and feel, at least on the outside, they will feel and recover a little bit better than you, or a little bit faster than you, from what happened. And that can provoke some envy in you, like, wow, like I just gave all this and I just lost all this and they are just doing just fine. Like especially, research shows that men typically rebound quicker than women do to help process their pain. Just in all relationships, not just this type of relationship, but all relationships, is how they work through. This is how they can work through their emotions a lot of times. And that can feel very humiliating. And that can make it seem like, well, did I even matter at all? And again, with that, I want to validate that and say, I get it. But yeah, that can definitely happen. And it doesn't mean that it will always be this way, but those can be feelings that you feel at the beginning. A couple more things, and then we will close out this episode for you to be aware of, or if you decide to leave, is being villainized by other people as well. So I kind of already mentioned this when I talked about, them talking about you with other loved ones or shared people in your community. But if this person has really presented as super like kind and loving and docile and passive and lovable, like all the things that made you connect with them, typically people in your community are going to feel the exact same way. And so it can be very common, which happens in lots of breakups and most breakups, that people feel like they have to choose sides. And if this person has been really presenting you as the villain and as this controlling, horrible person or mean person or whatever it might be, and they're kind of convincing about that, I want you to be prepared for your friends or your family or even your kids choosing them over you. And again, that can make you feel very hopeless and very powerless and it can feel very unfair. But these are things that you cannot control. And so that's why it's going to be very important, if you are not connected to a therapist or to a support system to help you work through this and learn how to let go of things and surrender things that you cannot control, that you're going to need to do that. Allow these people to have their own thoughts and learn to let go of things that you can't control. And the last thing, which I kind of already just hit on, for you to expect if you leave, is to do that self-work, to do that self-worth work to get your self-love quotient up so that you won't enter into this type of partnership again, and you'll be able to expect and require people to show up for you in a different way, to have that little ringer or that alarm bell go off if you get into a relationship where someone is seeking for you to mother them, which again can feel very romantic at first, especially if you grow up in a codependent settings where you are the caregiver. It can feel very natural to you, when we need to switch and change what feels natural for you in partnerships. You can care and love and honor somebody and see them as a great person, and also not make it your fault if they can't give you what you want. It has nothing to do with whether or not they are good people, and nothing to do with whether or not that means you're selfish. It's just not you're not a good fit. Okay, you don't have to make it be something it's not. So, yeah, that's it, y'all. Woo! Got it in. So with the intro and outro, this will probably be a little bit over an hour, but I was worried it's going to be longer. So I hope that this was helpful. I tried to make it as extensive as I can. And for women who needed to hear this, or women who've gone through this before, the extent that these stories go is actually pretty tragic. I've read stories of women who's this exact same situation I'm talking about. The men became so resentful they end up harming the woman. I already said creating extra families, creating Kevin Samuels, red pill groups, and just like creating a circle of men who support them and support them in devaluing their partner. It's very sad to see how this shows up, and also is very common. And because this is so common, I just wanted to make sure that y'all heard this so that you can avoid the okie doke in the future. So I'm sending you all love, and I hope that you have a great rest of your week. Hey, so thanks for listening to today's podcast. If you enjoy what you learned today, it doesn't have to stop here. Check out the Black Girls Heal website at blackgirlsheal.org for more resources to help you heal from intimacy disorders like love addiction and love avoidance. The best time to start or restart your healing journey is now. You can grab a free copy of our 5-step roadmap to heal love addiction, love avoidance, and love deprivation by going to blackgirlsheal.org/roadmap. And if you're on social media, feel free to follow us at Black Girls Heal on Instagram and Facebook.